Angela Merkel's CDU party and her coalition partners, the SPD, are both set for huge losses in Sunday's regional elections for the German state of Hesse, plunging Berlin's government into a fresh crisis. Playing down the potential blow, Chancellor Merkel said it was wrong to stylise the vote as a mini-national election. But coming just 2 weeks after the electoral catastrophe of Merkel's Bavarian allies in their state vote, all eyes are on Hesse, widely viewed as a bellwether for national politics. Well, joining me for analysis on this is Jessica Sultz, who's in Berlin. Jessica, what can we expect to happen on Sunday's vote?
Well, it's a very worrying sign for Angela Merkel. The Conservatives in the state of Hesse are really slumping in opinion polls here. And the CDU, Angela Merkel's party, looks set to fall around 11 percentage points to around 27%. The SPD also set for losses of about 8 percentage points to around 22%. And here we're seeing, a national trend, the state following a national trend. The smaller parties, the Green Party and also the far-right AfD party, looks set to mop up support here, with the Alternative for Germany looking set to enter the state parliament in Hesse for the first time with around 13% of the vote. Now, Hesse is a very wealthy central German state. They've enjoyed comfortable leadership under the Conservatives for around 20 years. And their incumbent Conservative leader, Volker Bouffier, has tried to keep this election self-contained and immune from the Merkel malaise that we're seeing in Germany at the moment. He is telling supporters to vote for their interests in the state of Hesse and not try to punish the government in Berlin. And we actually heard the German Chancellor Angela Merkel say this herself when she visited Hesse over the past few days. So a sign of just how worried the Conservatives are about the outcome of this election.
Well, we seem to say this a lot, Jessica, but could this spell the end of Angela Merkel?
Well, I think we need to wait to see the outcome of this election. If the Conservatives manage to hold on to power in Hesse, then I think we'll hear a very audible sigh of relief from the government here in Berlin. But if the Conservatives lose power, and we could actually see a shake-up of leadership in the state of Hesse if they lose enough support, then this is a real worrying sign for Merkel, because it will be interpreted as a direct vote against Angela Merkel's leadership here in Berlin. And Angela Merkel will make it very difficult for Angela Merkel to make the decision to stand for re-election as head of the Conservative Party at the party conference in December. Although any possible successors to Angela Merkel are really hard to find at the moment. She certainly hasn't named anyone. But an also worrying sign in this election for Angela Merkel will be the poor performance of the Social Democrats if that happens, because there's a growing number of voices within the Social Democrat leadership who are blaming their poor performance on Angela Merkel, saying that they are suffering in the shadow of the Conservatives in this government. And many members of the Social Democrats are saying that if they do badly in this election, then it might be time to pull out of the coalition government in Berlin altogether. And that would be political chaos in Berlin. And we may even see new elections, which would not be good for the Conservatives or the Social Democrats.
Well, as we've heard there, that the focus is very much on Miami and this mail distribution centre, where it's thought that most of the several parcels at least were processed. And there's, of course, a fear that more could be at large. The police are working with the Postal Service to identify quickly any more parcels that may still be in the public domain. The authorities have called for vigilance, and it's of course not known if these parcels are hoaxes or if they may be real bombs. But as we've heard the police saying there, it's far better to be safe than sorry. The Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen has confirmed that some packages originated from Florida, and she says, "I'm confident that this person or people will be brought to justice." Now, there's been praise for a security guard who spotted a device that was sent to Robert De Niro's office in New York. It's a retired police officer. He was off duty at the time, watching on TV, and recognised looking at the pictures of some of these parcels. It jogged his memory, and he thought, I saw one of those a couple of days ago, looked suspicious. He raised the alarm, and sure enough, it was another suspected device. Now, most of the targets have been high-profile Democrats, and all have been outspoken critics of Donald Trump. But of course, the identity of who's behind this is unknown. We can't say for sure that that Trump supporters are behind it. There's even been suggestions from conservatives that it may be some kind of liberal plot to boost support for the Democrats, but there's absolutely no evidence for that at this stage.
Well, it's a highly charged atmosphere in the US at the moment. Obviously, we're just a few weeks to go till the midterm elections. What's the political dimension to this? What other reactions have there been?
It's hard to underestimate the importance of this time. We know what the state of American politics is like, and at this time, just 2 weeks before the midterms, it is indeed a frenzied atmosphere. The elections could determine the direction of American politics, and particularly the Trump presidency. So there is very much a focus on the political rhetoric at this time. Trump, of course, himself has been criticized for his comments. One of the targets was the former Vice President Joe Biden under Barack Obama. And he says that this is something of a wake-up call for the country. Let's have a listen to him.
It's not America. It's not who we are. It's not who we are. And it's time for us, I hope this has been enough of a shockwave for people to say, okay, enough is enough. Trying to divide people, it's dangerous in a country like ours.
Now, it's been pointed out that Biden himself perhaps bears some responsibility. He's once reportedly said that if he'd been in high school with Donald Trump, then he'd have fought him. Donald Trump tweeted yesterday, turning the attack again on the media, blaming them for much of the anger that's in the country, and again saying there's too much fake news, which is completely hateful. But we're still seeing sort of Jekyll and Hyde Donald Trump here. On the one hand, he's calling for peace and harmony. At the same time, critics say that a lot of his comments, particularly when firing up his base, amount to incitement to violence.
The director of the CIA has briefed US President Donald Trump on the investigation into the murder of Jamal Khashoggi after returning from a fact-finding mission from Turkey. Unconfirmed media reports say that Gina Haspel has listened to an audio recording of the Saudi journalist's killing. Last night, a vigil was held outside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, where Khashoggi was last seen alive. A group calling itself Khashoggi Friends Around the World called for Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to be held responsible for the murder. To give us an update on these developments, I'm joined now by Reuters journalist Emily Wither, who's in Istanbul. Emily, thanks so much for being with us. We've heard that the CIA Director Gina Haspel has briefed Donald Trump on the investigation. What can you tell us on how that investigation is progressing?
We don't know what Gina Haspel said to President Trump in that briefing. And we still don't actually know what the contents of this audio recording is. We've heard in some of the pro-government newspapers here that it details a very gruesome and brutal interrogation in which Jamal Khashoggi had his fingers cut off and that eventually he was killed in a very brutal and horrible way. But I think the question that everybody really has is, does that audio recording provide some kind of evidence that links what happened inside the Saudi consulate on October 2nd to the higher powers in Saudi Arabia, or whether this was just some kind of rogue operation? We have heard from one European security source who was briefed on the audio recording, and he said that an argument did break out inside the consulate, insults were exchanged, and that someone in the consulate said to Jamal Khashoggi, let's teach him a lesson. Another line of investigation at the moment is this well inside the Saudi Consul General's garden. We've been told by Turkish police that they are testing water samples from that well, and we don't know why, and we don't know whether they will go back into the Saudi Consul General's residence yet to investigate more the well area.
Well, we heard yesterday Saudi prosecutors for the first time describing Jamal Khashoggi's murder as premeditated. If that's the line they're taking now, do we have any more information as who might be made to take responsibility for this killing?
That was quite an interesting U-turn, because we have to remember that until a couple of days ago, Saudi Arabia was saying that this whole killing was an accident and that it wasn't premeditated. So they have changed their story here now, as they have done multiple times. And I think that's really what everybody is looking at now, is who ordered this and ultimately who bears responsibility for this. And many here in the region fear that there could be a culture of immunity here. We just have to look at that memorial that happened last night outside the consulate. And there was a Palestinian journalist there, for example, who told us that she is afraid and that many are afraid that the same thing could happen to her. If we look at Turkey, for example, there are many Syrians here who have fled President Bashar al-Assad. There are Egyptians who have fled the Sisi government. There are Iranians living here in exile, and they are looking to what's happened and wondering if the same thing could happen to them. They want to see what the international community's response will be, and if there isn't a strong response, they're worried that that sends a message to other governments in the region that it's okay to do this and that you'll get away with it. But I think we won't see that strong reaction from the international community until there is some kind of evidence that is shown that links what happened inside the consulate to the very top of the Saudi government.